So the war ends. America and the Allies are victorious in World War II. In order to get to that victory, America aligns itself with Russia and Britain because they're the only two um, standing at the time. um, this alliance between uh, America and Russia is uh, a sort of unsettled alliance. It's not always uh, the greatest alliance. Roosevelt is uncertain about Stalin. The same with Churchill, who is also unsure about Stalin, but that's who they've got. And that's who they are fighting with. And that's who they need to depend on. And so during the war, uh, America does all it can to support the war effort, to fund troops, to win the war, and to elevate morale, not only of soldiers but of Americans, to continue on with the war that grinds, that tens of millions of people die in. Um, that victory leaves the opposition party in America in a tough spot. Um, the tough spot for that opposition party is that they've spent a very long time talking about how terrible the policies of Roosevelt were. But Roosevelt and Truman just won a war, a world war. And now, for the second time in half a century, the Democratic Party, a Democratic president, has won a major world war. So the Democratic President Wilson and Democratic President Roosevelt have just ushered the world through two great wars and have come on the other side victorious. These were wars that Republicans didn't want to fight. Um, if that's the position you're in, what's the position you're going to take? You're going to critique the victory. And that becomes sort of one part of the Red Scare. Jack Warner, in the making of the Mission to Moscow movie, that movie was made uh, to benefit the United States government uh, because their allies, the Russians, were fighting with them, and they wanted Americans to feel like they were in the fight with somebody who was worthy of being in a fight with. The reality is that America and Britain could never have won the war without Russia. Russia took more casualties than all other countries combined in the war. They were the reason they broke the German army, and without that, without the fight in Leningrad, Stalingrad, and in the Western Front of Russia, it's very possible that the Germans and Japanese would have won. And so Americans really did owe a debt to Russia for the valor and the tenacity with which they fought in that war. When the war was over, however, um, uh, what really became sort of the end to this conflict or the Red Scare was that America thought that they had a tool with which they could control the rest of the world because they were the only, besides the British who had helped build the nuclear bomb, they had a nuclear weapon that nobody else had. And much of what America had thought that they would be able to do is essentially threaten the rest of the world with nuclear weapons. In 1949, however, um, the Russians detonated a nuclear bomb, and this completely scrambled the calculation that America had. And now they recognize that somehow the Russians got the plans for the bomb, and now communism and democracies were in parallel in terms of their ability to destroy each other. And many people began to worry that this was going to lead to the destruction of the world. And it became clear that a British scientist who was part of the Manhattan Project had given the plans to the Soviet Union. Um, the reason that he said that he gave those plans to the Soviets is because he thought that it was a frightening um, prospect for a single country to have such a great weapon, and that it had created an imbalance in the world. So you have this problem. So now you have communism spreading around the world because of the aftermath of the war and economic downturns and the problems and people trying to find a path through. In America, you have more problems, and some of the problems are long-standing problems. Uh, Minorities want rights. African Americans fought in World War II, and just like after they had fought in World War I, they thought they were going to be treated fairly afterwards for the sacrifices that they made. Um, Many people, conservatives, um, did did not want those changes to occur. Conservatism is an ideology that is premised on maintaining the past order. That's the conserve in conservatism. And therefore, change is always frightening to conservatives. Conservatives don't want things to change. But people in America wanted things to change because it wasn't good for them. And so African Americans, women, other minorities begin to pop up and say, "Hey, we're not being included here." And then, sort of the third leg of this stool. So Democrats won the war. Uh, there's a struggle for civil rights. Um, and then the third part is there is an economic boom afterwards, after the war. All of these things can be attributed to the policies of the New Deal, of progressives. And so progressives have theoretically, in quotations, won World War II. They have created the greatest economic advancement in the history of the world. And now they have a civil rights movement happening at the same time. And 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 Truman, when he becomes the president, he wants to settle this problem. And so he attempts to integrate the military, to racially integrate the military, bring African Americans into the military with equality. And he finds pushback, not only from not from conservatives. I mean, the thing is that we're talking about conservatives. We're not really talking about parties here. And so this is why, like, I want to be very, very careful about political party discussions and keep it towards progressivism and conservatism, because the impulses to conservative and progressivism is in contest in throughout this 100-year period. Like, what parties are responsible for conservative or progressive ideas? And many Southern Democrats, who will later, in the late 90s and 2000s, become conservative Republicans, are oppose racial integration. They oppose many of the economic ideas of the New Deal. Here, you do have a Republican Party who is out of power, and if you're going to try and get back into power, the thing you have to do is fight an economic boom, a party that won a war. How do you do that? You do it by taking the elements of their success and making them the foundations for America's failure. So you say, the Democratic Party aligned itself with Russia. Russia is now communist, and communism is spreading. Therefore, anything that the Democratic Party did during World War II to advance the war, that was them supporting communism. But also the New Deal, many of the wealthy and business owners in the New Deal claimed, if you remember, that Social Security, that minimum wage, that unionization, that anything that helped workers was socialist or communist, and they railed against it. They were opposed to these types of efforts, and so they just began to tell people, "Oh, look how well you're doing now that the war is over. We don't need any of those things." This is exactly what happened after the end of World War I. That's how you get the 1920s. The problem is that conservatives were ignoring all of the people who weren't being economically helped by the economy, and those were minorities and women. And there was a disparity between, there was a difference, a vast difference between the white middle class, who were being helped by things like the GI Bill, uh, the Homeowners Loan Corporation, the FHA, who were helping them buy houses and get houses, but they were also, those things were also harming African Americans, uh, who weren't able to get those same loans as the white middle class, and so the part of the Red Scare was to convince people that America was a Christian nation. It was the foundation of modern Christian nationalism, which is a hallmark of the Republican Party right now, meaning that they believe that America is a Christian nation only for Christians, and only people who believe the Christianity they believe. And it cut people out. Obviously cut people out, because it means that if you're not a Christian, then you don't belong. That framing is about whiteness. It's about saying that white people are superior to other people, and white people deserve better in America than everybody else, and that everybody else should just get on the train of white Christians and essentially take what they get. And this became the real problem during this time period. It began to demand conformity. It demanded conformity not only of white suburbanites, but it demanded conformity of minorities as well. No tolerance for people who said, there's a problem in America, there's a problem with equality. If you said there was a problem with equality, well, you must be a communist, because America is the greatest country in the world, and therefore you must hate America. And so why don't you stop hating America? America, love it or leave it. That started to become a phrase in the 1970s, but it started here in the 1950s. And we will see that, and that the attack on African Americans who are protesting unequal treatment, but also who just want to move into neighborhoods where white people live, this becomes a problem. And so the Red Scare is just a sort of mark of conservatism that attempts to stop the advancement of the rights of working people to unionize. It essentially valorizes and says the only worthy people are people with money. If you need anything from me, email me or come to office hours. All right, I'll see you all in the next wrap-up video.